Hello everyone, and this is BioPhoenix here, and today we're going to be doing a random discussion video, and on camera, because I feel like I haven't done one of these in forever, but yeah, it's about time, I guess I might as well do one. And today's topic is going to be talking about my earliest memories when I first discovered emulation. So yeah, whenever I first discovered emulation, it's one of those topic ideas that I have heard about from, like, you know, various other forums and such, and I always, like, never really thought about doing a video on it until just recently, and it was like, you know what, I don't think I've ever really talked about it much on this channel outside of talking about it on stream, but, you know, figured I might as well do a topic video on it, and then, of course, you guys can, you know, to comment about, like, what were some of your earliest memories of first discovering what emulation was, and what were, like, the first games that you tried on them, because that's what this is going to be about, you know, talking about some good old nostalgic shit. So, with that being said, let's just get right to it. Alright, so my very earliest memories that I think it was about 2004 or 2005, it was around there. I remember my friend David, he, on his computer, I think his babysitter or his, like, babysitter's, like, boyfriend or something, like, installed, like, an NES emulator on his computer. And I actually found out what emulator it was. It was called JNES. It was the one with, like, the light blue, like, icon. Yeah, apparently that emulator is, like, super, like, outdated and hasn't been updated in, like, ages, but yeah, kind of interesting to actually rediscover that one again. But, yeah, so that was the very first time I ever heard of emulation. He's like, yeah, dude, you can play, like NES games and Super NES games on here, like, and I was like, wait, you can do that on a computer? Like, and I was like, yeah. It's kind of funny. And then, of course, the very first game that I played on that NES emulator, of course, because, like, I was looking through all, like, the files of the different names, and there was quite a few in there. I don't remember all of them, obviously, but I do remember the very first one I checked out. It was Adventure Island 1. And, well, firstly, the reason why I checked that one out first is because, you know, it was, like, one of the first ones on the list, and it was a name that I knew, because I rented Adventure Island 2, and I really loved it, but I never knew what the first one was like, so it's like, oh, let's do that one. You know, I've always wanted to play it, and then, yeah, I played it with a freaking keyboard, and of course it was, like, really hard, but, yeah, you know, that was the very first game I ever emulated, was Adventure Island 1. Also, another thing I do want to mention, really quickly, because it's funny, and also I have no idea when the hell else I'm going to talk about this, but I remember the game that I played after that one was The Adventure of Tom Sawyer, and, yeah, like, on NES, yeah, and it's, like, a really shit platformer, and yeah, I remember that was actually pretty funny too. And also, one other thing I do have to mention about that game that just makes me laugh that I found out about was that the final boss in that game is a freaking dinosaur. Yeah, there's a freaking dinosaur in a Tom Sawyer video game, and I remember, like, he like looks super depressed, and when you beat him, he was like, he goes happy or something. It's so stupid. Yeah, anyways, I just had to mention that because it was just too weird not to. But yeah, that was like the second game, because, as again, Adventure was, like, right beside Adventure Island, so, yeah. There you go, that was, like, the very first one that I can remember. But, of course, let's talk about, like, some of the other systems that I do remember emulating earlier on. Alright, so, as for the next system I'll mention, I guess will be the Super Nintendo. So, the very first game that I remember emulating on the Super NES, it was actually using a ZSNES, the one that had that really cool heads-up display where everything was purple and your cursor would change to, like, orange and it was big. Yeah, that one was pretty iconic and fun. But, yeah, no, that was the first one I ever did, and as for the game that I first played on it, it was actually Chrono Trigger, believe it or not. Yeah, I played Chrono Trigger on ZSNES, and it was all thanks to my friend Ian, who, you know, he was the one who told me about the game, and then, of course, we knew David, so, you know, we all, you know, like, that, basically, like, Ian was the one who told me about the game, and then, you know, David somehow, like, got a hold of the game, and then, yeah, and then we played on his computer for a little bit, and yeah, and then, of course, I eventually downloaded it myself and played more of it, and that's when I, like, fell in love with it, and, yeah, no, it was cool, and I remember the first time I seen the game, I was like, wow, this is, like, Dragon Ball Z looking, like, you know, obviously, you know, same artist, but yeah, no, that was another one that I remember that was kind of interesting that I discovered, like, roughly around the same time as that, and then, of course, you know, it ended up becoming, like, a big favorite of mine. Alright, now, the next one here, we're going to be talking about some handheld devices, so we're going to be talking about the Game Boy Advance. Advance, and the very first one I downloaded for that one was Visual Boy Advanced, which was one that I actually used for a very, very long time. It wasn't until, like, recent years I finally changed to, like, what was it, MGBA, I think it's called. But, yeah, no, that one I've used for, like, ever. And the very first game I ever played on there was a pretty typical game. It was a Pokemon game. It was actually a Pokemon ROM hack that I first played on it. And yeah, that was when I first discovered like what ROM hacks were, so that was kind of cool within itself. But unfortunately, I could not remember what Pokemon ROM hack it was. I actually did try looking up like a bunch of different early ROM hacks that came out around like, you know, like mid 2000s to like, you know, it was like at least before 2010. And yeah, and I was like, man, I can't find this shit. I want to say it was like, the name of it was like either a color or it was like a material of some kind, because I know it was I think it was a ROM hack of Ruby, I think, or if it wasn't Ruby, it might have been Fire Red. But either way, though, like one main thing I do remember about it that was interesting was the fact that they actually changed every single sprite within the game, like all the like the Pokemon, like they were not like typical Pokemon. Like I don't remember what the starters were, but they were like very weird looking, and it was very fascinating. I was like, wow, like someone changed up like everything. It was kind of neat. It was definitely not Clover. I know that because I know that's like the crazy like one. But yeah, but it was basically kind of like Clover in the sense that they literally changed like everything. But yeah, obviously, but this one that I remember, it wasn't as like crazy and like offensive as that one. But yeah, no, like it was just, I don't know, if anyone out there knows like which one I could be talking about, please let me know, because like I've been trying to look for it and I haven't been able to. But still, it was very interesting though to learn about that. Okay, we're going to talk about two more left, and now this next one, we're going to be talking about the PS1. So I remember emulating PS1 was always a bitch for me back in the day, because I remember that was like the first time I downloaded an emulator where you actually needed BIOS for it to work. Where, you know, all these other emulators, like, you didn't need BIOS, like, you just download the thing and it worked. You know, you didn't need to, like, do any tinkering and shit. So that was the first one that I remember that always gave me trouble, and of course it was EPCSXE. Which was one that was good for a while, even though it did have some problems. Like, I remember, like, if you had a game that was in, like, a file format where it would do, like, the list trackings, like, the game would not have music, which would always, like, anger me, because I'm like, fuck, like, why? Anyways, but despite that, though, like, it was one that did work, like, decently for a while. And, yeah, the very first game I ever played on there, well, of course, if you know me well enough, you probably know what game it is. It was actually Kagero Deception 2. Yeah, so I remember when I was first getting into emulation and such, and then when I was, like, you know, looking up stuff about the Deception series, the only game I played at the time was the first one, you know, the one that I grew up with and, like, loved the shit out of. Well, when I was first getting into emulation, when I was first discovering that, you know, that the game actually had like more the series had more than one game in it, I was all like, oh wow, I really want to play these, but like I could like never find them in stores, because most stores that I knew, like they always get rid of all their old shit, so obviously I couldn't find any like PS1 games easily. And then, of course, you know, like that was, like, really the only way I figured. It was like, oh, let's just try it on here, even though I don't know if it's gonna work, because, you know, like I said, my computer at the time was really shit. Like, even PS1 games struggled with it. It did work, but it did have some slowdowns, and, of course, I also played with a keyboard, and yeah, good luck trying to play a game with tank controls on a keyboard. Like, yeah, it was really hard. But yeah, I do remember that was the first one that I ever tested on PSXE. Yeah, wait, there's no C in that one. Okay, I might have fucked up the name. But either way, yeah, so that was the first one I ever played on there. And yeah, it was very fascinating. And then eventually I found a copy of it, and, you know, I was actually able to play it properly back when the game was actually affordable. Alright, as for the last one that I'm going to briefly talk about here, so I'm going to talk about the PS2. And yeah, obviously it was PCSX2. And of course, the very first time I remember emulating PS2 wasn't on my computer, because, God, my computer would not be able to handle that at that time. This was about 2011? Yeah, it was about 2011, 2012. And I remember at that time, my original PS2 was fucking dead as shit, so like it was not working at all, and there was a lot of PS2 games I had that like I really wanted to play, but I just couldn't get another PS2. So of course, like, the best way that I could think of was, you know, my friend had a decent computer, and I was able to play PS2 games, or at least the very few that worked, because as you know, back in 2011, 2012, that emulator was still pretty early, so there was a lot of shit that didn't work. But one of the games that did work, well, worked enough, was Dot Hack, and that was a series that I really loved at the time. I mean, I still love it today, it's just, you know, I just haven't gone back and, you know, played them in a while. But yeah, like, at the time, that was a series I was really into. And of course, I had Volume 1 and Volume 2. Though, at the time, I didn't finish Volume 2. I remember getting stuck at a part, but I wanted to, you know, try to play through it through the emulated version. And I remember when I was trying to do that at the time, yeah, the game did run okay. Like, it had some stuttering, and there were some textures that were kind of weird, but despite that, like, the game actually, like, worked decently. So yeah, no, it was kind of an interesting way of playing. Of course, I didn't beat it through that version, but, you know, I just figured I'd let you all know that, yeah, that was a very interesting time, and I'm just so freaking glad that that emulator is actually, like, working a lot better now. Like, almost everything is compatible now. Like, very few games have problems, so yeah, so thankful for that. Okay, and my battery is about to die, so I'm just gonna make this quick. So that's all the memories I gotta say for early emulation days. So if you guys have any of your own stories, feel free to comment or do a video response or whatever it is you want to do. So with that being said, thanks for watching and commenting, and have yourselves a great day.